Hello, I'm Rosemary Connolly, and I'm here today in the studio of Joan Applebaum. Joan is a visual artist, and she works in watercolor on paper and also on the beautiful medium of silk. And so we are going to see what she does today and how she does it. And her themes are landscapes and nature themes. And she's really enjoying living here in Delaware and taking advantage of all our beautiful scenery. So let's hear what Joan has to say.
So Joan, can you tell us a little bit about your background, what jobs you've had in the past?
Sure. Well, my background is in art. I went to college with the intention of becoming an art teacher, and I kind of switched gears midway and graduated with a degree in studio art and in photography, and found work working in visual merchandising for Allied Stores in Syracuse. So I did that for several years, and I also gravitated back toward teaching. And I was teaching on the side in some adult ed programs, also doing some private lessons in my home. And after my kids were born, I stayed home for a few years with the kids, still working on the art, still entering juried art shows, selling a little bit of art here and there in the galleries, and picking up some part-time jobs. Some of them had to do with the arts, a lot of them didn't. And then finally, I went really back into teaching when I was given an opportunity to work with some at-risk youth of various ages, and I worked in the after-school programs, teaching art, basically keeping them in a safe location. That's more what it was really about. But from there, I did that for several years, and then from there, I went to working for the YMCA of Greater Syracuse. It was actually the arts branch, and I worked as a teacher for all ages and abilities, and also worked as the art studio coordinator, which meant that I was working on coordinating the education programs, doing a little bit of graphic design and layout for their publications for the art studio, and teaching. And it was probably that's probably my most enjoyable job that I've ever had. So it was great working there.
Yeah, I'm sure. Very rewarding.
Definitely rewarding, and it was a great sense of community there, and just working with all ages, children, young adults, old adults, teenagers. It was wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome. Joan, what is your primary medium then? What techniques do you use? Can you tell us?
Oh, I feel like I don't have a primary medium. I go back and forth between watercolor and acrylic because they both present different challenges. And also the image that I'm trying to create is going to be dependent on on the medium. So there are many times when I fall in love with a particular scene, the lighting, the color, and I have to make a decision. Do I want to do it in acrylic or in watercolor? And usually if I'm looking for something more atmospheric, I will go for the watercolor.
Okay, so we're going to move over to the area in Joan's studio where she does her silk painting, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the process, which is really very interesting and exciting. So come on over. So we've moved over to the silk painting area in Joan's studio, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her process and how she goes about this magical medium.
Okay, well, today I'm working on a scarf. This is an 11-inch by 60-inch silk scarf. The first thing you do is you start with a pattern, so you come up with a design, usually in a sketchbook, and then transfer it to maybe many pieces of paper so that you can actually lay it underneath the scarf, which has been stretched across a frame, because we want a nice taut kind of feel to that. So we'll stretch it across there.
It's a very interesting frame setup you've got there.
It's a homemade one. It's pretty cool.
Yes.
And we slide the pattern underneath, and then you can look through the silk because it is semi-transparent, and I can apply the Gutta or water-based resist to the silk, and that creates lines or borders which keep one color from flowing into another. So we apply it on there, and we have to let it sit and dry. It dries pretty quickly. If I put the fan on, it will probably be dry within a half an hour. and then I can start painting. Painting is the fun part. This is the more labor-intensive part here.
You're sort of drawing with that.
You are drawing with it, yes, and your fingers can cramp up a little bit. You have to take a break every now and then. But the painting is really the fun part. So once this dries, then we move into the painting part. Now, my scarves, I have several different patterns, but quite often I will do the same pattern and just vary the colors a little bit.
Joan, what kind of paint is that, or is it a dye, or what is it that you're using?
Well, what I'm using right now is called Dynaflow, and it comes from Jacquard Company, and they manufacture paint for fabrics, for fibers. This particular paint works more like a dye than a paint. It's very, very thin and runny, and also very much like watercolor. You can layer one color on top of another for some beautiful effects. And as in watercolor, you kind of let the liquid do the work. And so you can see, if you can get in close, you can see that there's a beautiful blending that happens with a darker blue and then the lighter turquoise.
Right. And I know these are dragonflies. Do you pursue certain themes in your work?
Oh, I love nature.
Yeah.
I love nature. Dragonflies are popular. Everybody likes dragonflies. As in watercolor, you do want a really good brush. You want a decent brush. You don't want one that's going to be dropping little bits of fiber, little brush hairs or whatever all over the silk.
Right.
So yeah, you do want a good brush, and you also want to keep your equipment as clean as you can. So, and that's pretty easy to do. And once you're done, you wash your brushes with soap and water, and they're good to go again.
What else can you tell us about this process? So once you've painted all of this.
So once I complete the painting, and so we have several dragonflies on here that still need to be painted, I will let all those dragonflies sit for a while, and then I will come back and do all the background area here. And the scarf or any silk painted fabric should sit at least for 24 hours, sometimes even longer, because you want those dyes, those colors to really settle in. Now, once you feel that they have settled in enough, you will take this over to the ironing board and put your iron on a silk setting, and you will heat set those colors.
Straight right on the fabric? You don't
Right
put
on
anything in
there.
between?
Once in a while, I'll put something in between, like a cloth. But you don't have to worry about the resist or the gutta. It doesn't come up on the iron. You think it's going to, but it doesn't. Oh, unless your iron's way too hot. But, as I said, you've already put it on the silk setting, hopefully.
Right.
So let's see, where was I? So you heat set that, and then once it's heat set, you can put the scarf in some lukewarm water, let it sit for a little bit, and then just kind of rub around where the water resist is, and it will come right out, and you'll have these beautiful white lines.
Does it
that
just
are left.
dissolve?
It dissolves. It dissolves. It will. It dissolves, and it leaves a little film all around the sink. So you do need to clean that up. But so it dissolves, and then after that, you can throw the scarf in the dryer for just a couple of minutes. Silk dries very, very quickly, as most people know. And then I usually go over it with the iron on the steam setting to steam out any other wrinkles. And that's the whole process. So typically, to do a scarf, it's a 2-day process, because you do want to let those colors sit at least 24 hours before you start removing the resist. Sometimes I let them sit a little longer. If I have a scarf that, as this one is, you've seen the other picture of the dragonfly scarf, it's mainly dark colors. And so I sometimes will let that one sit for at least a couple of days just to make sure that those colors are really set.
Right. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you face in this work?
In this work? Oh my gosh. Once in a while you will find that you have this beautiful line that you've created with the resist has cracked or breached. Perhaps you didn't make your line thick enough, or you just missed a spot. And then the color just runs into places that you don't want. And that's when you quickly create a new plan. And you can usually save, your work. You just come up with a new plan. And so perhaps that color that you wanted in the background isn't going to be the color you had in the background because something else ran in there. So then you reassess your colors and what you think might work with what's sort of accidentally run in there. So that's one of the challenges. That's really, I think, only the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about what happens when you have a creative block and how you
Right.
do what you do when that happens, and so tell us more.
Yes, so every now and then I will experience a creative block, and I feel like I want to be in the studio painting, but I don't know what to do. And typically, what I found to be a good nudge is to just take some watercolor paper and do something abstract. In this case here, plastic wrap was used on top of a nice wet watercolor so that we have areas that just pool around the plastic and create interesting shapes. And in this one over here, I used tissue paper, like the type that you might use to gift wrap a package.
Oh, okay.
And so the
So you
tissue,
crumple it up
so you
and-
crumple it up on top of the wet paper and put the pigment on top and let it sink through.
Ooh.
And so you get a great little crackle kind
Love
of feel to that one. So, and then you say, well, what can I do with these? Well, often they will lend themselves to some type of idea. So this was one that I did a few years ago, and in fact I did it when I was here in the winter a couple of years ago, and didn't know what to do, and so I did this background here. Thought of a heron and looked online for some interesting pictures, and I found this one of this heron with who's kind of, I don't know, I want to say preening a little bit, you know.
Sure.
So, but still kind of camouflaged and hidden in there. And so that's what came from this one. And fortunately, there was even a light space up here, which became sort of like the moon, you know. So it's basking in the moonlight there. And over here, I did another abstract background and didn't know what to do with it, and this probably sat around for a while, and then I had the idea for the pussy willows. I had a beautiful pussy willow tree in my backyard, and so I brought a few branches in and drew them, painted them, and just thought about doing the geometric shapes around there to kind of enhance the whole picture a little bit, and added there's a combination of watercolor, and there's ink in here, and there's metallic paint, and I think that's it. Maybe even colored pencil, I'm not quite sure. A bunch of different things in here.
Mixed media.
Mixed media, definitely.
Wonderful.
So that's one of the things that I do to just get past creative block.
Right. So the last thing that I would like to ask you is, what's the best piece of advice you've been given as an artist?
It's just a piece of paper.
Right.
It is. And it's funny because I heard that from a teacher a long time ago. And a friend, an artist friend, and I were both talking about how difficult it is to move your studio, and I mean move from one state to another, and deciding what you want to keep and what you're going to throw away. And the idea of it's just a piece of paper takes on a different meaning then. And I did get rid of things. I really did. Still held on to a lot, but I think the it's just a piece of paper idea is really more toward not being afraid. Don't be afraid to put the mark on the paper. You know, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Not everything you do is going to be a work of art. Sometimes it's just practice.
Right, exactly. So, given that, what advice would you give to someone starting out?
The advice that I have always given to my students is to hold on to the paintings that they feel were not successful. And I know a lot of watercolor artists all feel the same way. We have a drawer full of pictures that didn't quite make it.
Right.
But sometimes when you go back and look at them later, you realize that they just didn't fill up to the expectation that you had at that time. And you'll look at it again with fresh eyes, and you'll see something different in it. So sometimes you'll see what you need to change, and other times you'll see that it really is a good piece of art, but it isn't the thing that you had in your brain, 5 days earlier or 5 months earlier or 5 years earlier.
Right.
So I would say if you're able to hold on to those pieces, definitely do it and look back and see if there are some that maybe are a little nicer than you thought. And then it's always good to look back and see how far you've come as well.
Exactly. Right. Very good. Joan, thank you so much for opening your studio to us
you're welcome.
today. It's been just a joy and exciting to see you work on silk and how you make these wonderful backgrounds. And so thank you very much for your time.